Hello everyone, how's everybody doing? I feel like I've been away for so long because I haven't made a video all week, but it's just been a very hectic and stressful week. My kids have been sick and my cat went into labor yesterday and she ran into a lot of complications, but she is resting nicely now and doing pretty well. It was kind of touch and go for a little while. It's a lot of blood. I'm like, freaked out for a little bit, but you know, the vet says that everything's going to be fine with her. So today's video, I want to talk about an issue that most of us survivors of sexual abuse, kind of go through. And as victims, we're sometimes asked, like, how could you have let the abuse happen? Or, how could you allow the abuse to go on for so long? And what people don't understand is that we don't let or allow abuse to happen to us. I mean, if we had a choice as a child to, know right off the ball, like this is wrong, then, obviously we wouldn't let or allow it to happen. But that's just, there's nothing we can do about it. We don't hold, as a child, the mental capacity, that an adult does. So with that, they overpower you. They manipulate you, they groom you into, thinking that what they're doing is okay. And this video, I also hope that it touches people who are kind of suffering with questions of, why do I feel so attached to my abuser? Why do I still love him? Why or her? Why do I feel like I need my abuser? Why do I feel guilty and blame myself? And this is kind of why. And today I'm going to talk about Stockholm Syndrome and betrayal bonds, which some people do call them trauma bonds. And they are a huge issue, especially, in people recovering. Stockholm Syndrome is the emotional bond between survivors of child sexual abuse and the people who perpetrated the abuse against them. The aspects of Stockholm Syndrome could be identified in the responses of adult survivors of child sexual abuse, which appear to impact their ability to report offenders. An emotional bond which has enabled the sexual abuse to continue to go on for years and years. And it has also served as a protection to the offender, after the abuse has occurred and during, because, sometimes Stockholm Syndrome not only affects the child that is literally going through the abuse, but it also affects you as an adult, and it can, go on and on for years and years. And some people, can feel this way, and then they just don't understand what is going on. So that's kind of why I'm going to discuss it today. And there is 5 stages of Stockholm Syndrome in victims who have been sexually abused, and I am going to go through each and every stage. And, I'm going to read from this information that I found online. And, yeah, it's definitely real. And the website that I got this information from is Mothers of Sexually Abused Children. And their website is www.mosac.net. And they have a lot of, good information over there. Oh, and before I go on with this, I got a wonderful opportunity. I contacted this Facebook page, and it's called It Was Me Campaign. And I had sent them a video of, I had sent them my YouTube video of the, my abuse and what I had to go through. And I had asked them very kindly if they would please share my story. I'm trying to get awareness out there. And they did, which was amazing, and I can't thank them enough for that. But then they asked me if I would like to be a part of their It Was Me campaign. And they're wonderful people. So what I had to do was make a short video of, saying something about my abuse and things like that, and and at the end of it say, it was me, you know, because they're trying to help raise awareness as well as I am. And so I got the opportunity to do that video, and I will post that to my YouTube, you know, after I post this video. And I couldn't be more blessed to be part of that, you know, organization's help in spreading awareness. So if you would like, you know, to go over and like their page, it's called It Was Me Campaign, and they give out a lot of information, and they have, you know, other survivors videos, and they are actually looking for, if you want to submit your own video to get your voice out there and to get people to hear you, head on over to their Facebook page, and they are very wonderful people. Okay, so the first stage of Stockholm Syndrome is denial and compliance. The abuser may threaten the victim's survival, so the victim is often unable to escape the abuser. So the victim will turn to them for protection. When faced with a threat, a victim may freeze to protect themselves or deny that they are at risk for being abused. Either option tends to be safer than resisting someone with more power and with the ability to inflict harm upon them. Denial is a normal defense mechanism that protects the person from being overwhelmed. And when you're being sexually abused, you have so many emotions running through you. And it's just, so to be able to, you know, just deny what's happening, to just be able to just deny it all, like, no, this did not happen, it was just a dream, you know, things like that. Like, that is a normal mechanism for your brain to make you think, to try to protect you from, you know, being overwhelmed with all of that emotion. And almost always, your first response is going to be denial when a tragedy occurs. And the ability to face that is usually a gradual process. Denial is a temporary state, which means, you know, eventually the denial part of it does end. But if it remains, you know, your main function to survive or to protect yourself, if it continues to remain for a long time, like, it's no longer going to be protecting you, because you're going to start maintaining a false reality on life. So, I mean, it works, you know, for like a temporary type thing, but if you continue to remain, you know, as a victim in denial of what is happening to you, then, you know, it's not going to be protective anymore, because the abuse is just going to continue to happen and happen and happen. And I think with me, you know, that was a lot of my problem. I was in such denial that my dad would do anything to hurt me. He loved me. Why would he, you know, take advantage of me if it wasn't okay? You know, things like that. So I was in denial for a very, very long time. And that became pretty much my reality on life, because, you know, there's so many other things too, that while I was living in this reality of denial, like, I was denying more than just, you know, the abuse that he was doing to me. Freezing is also a normal response to trauma. So when you're being abused and you freeze, you don't say no, you don't say yes, you don't say stop. You're just frozen in you know, in the moment. You're just, you've lost all sense of reality. Like, you're just frozen. And all the attention focuses on the threat, and you, as a victim, become quiet and compliant. A common response during a traumatic event is to dissociate, which means to separate or postpone a feeling that normally would be associated with a thought. Dissociating from one's feelings or thoughts allows a person to survive or endure the emotional pain and distress. Dissociation disrupts normal information processing and compartmentalizes traumatic memories. So, people who dissociate from their own mind and body while they're being sexually abused could wake up the next day and not even remember, bits and pieces of what happened. And I know that when I was a child, I dissociated a lot. But before that, I knew what dissociation was. I would say, well, I had a blackout because I don't remember. I don't remember certain stages and certain things that had happened, especially when I was just 13 coming forward. Like, there was still some things that just didn't make any sense to me. Like, I couldn't make any sense of it. And so now that I'm opening my brain a little more to the abuse and everything, like, I have bits and pieces of things that they just come flying out of my memory. And it's like, sometimes it's really hard to understand. And then other times I can put things together and realize, like, oh my God, like, this happened on this day when I was this age. But I didn't remember those things when I was younger because I had dissociated from my own mind and body, so that way when I took on that physical, emotional trauma to, my little body, I wasn't allowing it to affect me because I was just storing it somewhere in my brain, but not remembering. So compliance and denial are not only a survival mechanism, it also keeps victims from speaking or acting in a way to get out of the threatening situation. This stage is useful in considering why children are loyal to their abusers and do not come forward with the abuse. The child victim will attach to their perpetrator, so they fear the consequences of telling. And my fear of telling was, my dad was going to kill himself. And then my also other fear was, along with that, is I would lose my dad if I told. And it just happens. And there's not really any right way to explain why victims feel that way. But the second stage is coping with fear and anger. The initial response to an overwhelming threat is to be passive, to freeze, and fear, to be numb and shock. In that state, with the focus on whatever is threatening, other emotions are denied and they are suppressed. When fear and anger replace the frozen state, the intensity of emotion is very, very painful for a victim. This then increases the sense of powerlessness and helplessness the victim feels. The victim suppresses the feelings of danger, terror, and rage by denying these feelings. The victim is able to bond with the abuser, trying to please the abuser, taking his or her perspective to be hypersensitive to the abuser's feelings. The more the victim suppresses emotions and attempts to meet the abuser's needs, the stronger the betrayal bond becomes, or the trauma bond. Some people call them trauma bonds. Trauma bonds, betrayal bonds are almost like the exact same thing. So, betrayal bond refers to a bond that causes the person betrayed to bond with betrayer in such a way that even violence or a threat of death cannot dislodge this bond. That is how strong a betrayal bond is between a child and their abuser. The stress of the betrayal results in a neurochemical response similar to addiction. What may occur is that the bond becomes compulsive. So rather than avoiding an abuser, the victim develops an addiction to him or her. So just as, somebody becomes addicted to drugs or caffeine, sugar, things like that. Like, I know people need their morning coffee or else they can't, function well. Well, Children who are abused, when they form this betrayal bond, are the exact same way. Like, they cannot live without their abuser. These are a couple of signs of a betrayal bond, and I was able to relate to pretty much almost every single one of them. So if you do as well, you could be suffering with this type of bond to your abuser, or have suffered this type of bond, to your abuser. So I'm going to go over the list. So covering up and defending your abuser when others judge him or her. Continuing to believe false promises made by your abuser. Not reacting to an event to which others respond negative. Feeling powerlessness about the other person's behavior. Loyalty to someone who is hurting another person. Willingness to hold hurtful secrets. Belief that you can change the person from hurtful to non-hurtful. The inability to detach from the person even when you do not like, love, or trust them. You stay even when a part of you hates them. Missing your abuser or longing to have a relationship still. Covering up the abuse so others won't find out about it. Betrayal bonds do not dissolve on their own. Time does not heal them. It will be necessary to face the attachment to your abuser at some point in your healing. You need to face the feelings. Learn to trust yourself and learn to start trusting others too. So, the third stage is hope and gratitude. Victims convince themselves that their abuser is good. If the abuser does something kind for the victim, then he or she must have a good side. The victim bonds to that positive side of the abuser and remains in denial of the other danger-filled side. Bonding to this perceived good side of the abuser causes the victim to lose sight of his or her own beliefs, values, and sense of self. The perspective of the abuser becomes the child's. The child sees themselves as what the abuser sees them as. When that occurs in a child, this will be the only sense of self that the child has or that the child knows. Children will begin to think that the belief system, behaviors, and choices of the abuser are kind in nature. This belief contributes to a sense of safety and well-being. This is one of the reasons most children do not disclose the abuse, or they just eventually run away from it. The fourth stage is self-deprecation and depression. The victim has now bonded with the abuser and thinks he is good. The betrayal bond with the abuser has been developed, increasing the probability that the victim will remain alive and unharmed. Since the victim believes the abuser is the good guy, and they start to believe that police and other authority figures are bad people. Since the victim's sense of self becomes the abuser's view of the victim, he or she may see themselves as bad. And I've heard that from a lot of victims. Like, they felt like they were the bad person, or if they told, they were going to be the ones getting in trouble because, they let the abuse happen because that's what your abuser makes you think. The victim begins to blame themselves for allowing any harm done to them. The victim is suffering because compliance, denial, and other coping strategies did not remove all the pain. At this point of awareness, the victim may determine that he or she deserves to suffer. And that, a lot of victims as well will say, well, I deserved it. I deserve the abuse, especially victims who come forward, like they go through that stage of, like it's all my fault. And I had to deal with that for a really long time. Like that was something that I could not get over, was believing and thinking that everything was my fault. My dad was sitting in prison and it was my fault. When I got a letter one time that he said that he got his arm broken because he got in a fight or somebody beat him up. And like, I thought that was my fault. He's being abused in prison and that's my fault because I put him there. From his or her point of view, there is something fundamentally wrong with him or her, and that is why this is happening. Victims usually feel guilt, although not realistic guilt, and shame. It is common for victims to perceive themselves as bad, and negative thoughts and feelings about themselves keeps this assessment in place. Anger and criticism turns inwards. So instead of the abuse being, the hate and the anger and, all the little things that you criticize being about your abuser, victims turn it around and they put all that blame on themselves. So it is not directed towards the abuser or abusive events. Rather, the anger points to the victim, which in return results in depression. And almost all victims who are sexually abused have some form of depression, in all kinds of forms of mental health issues. In the final stage of Stockholm Syndrome, victims have accepted the situation and are not complaining or asking for help anymore. Victims are not motivated to try to get out of the situation. And if the opportunity arises for the chance to speak out or run from the abuse, the victim will have a hard time doing so with fear of losing their abuser. The child will appear to have a close attachment and relationship with the abuser. The child will not appear to fear or be angry with the abuser, having learned that, he or she is helpless to change the situation. The child victim in this stage has finally accepted and adapted to the sexual abuse. And I know that I've talked about that a lot. Like, I just accepted what was happening to me. And I no longer feared my dad. Like, through the whole, since I was 4 till I was 13, in that whole time frame, I cannot remember a single time that I was afraid of my dad. When I was 13, like I couldn't think of a single time where I was afraid of my dad. I actually didn't fear my dad until up until the point where I had to face him in court. And that is like literally the first time that I felt like I had to fear him. Looking my abuser in the eyes and telling the world what he did to me when I was just a 13-year-old girl was the day that I feared him. And I don't think that I feared him knowing that he was going to hurt me. I more or less feared him hating me. I didn't want him to hate me. I didn't want me to not be daddy's little girl anymore. And I struggled with that for a really long time because the bond that I had with my dad was so strong that if I wouldn't have had the support that I had through, the court trial and everything like that, I honestly don't know if I would have been strong enough to tell. So having a great support system behind somebody, especially, a child who has finally came forward with abuse is like the number one thing that I can express. If a child has a great support system behind them and people who believe them and people who are going to be there, for them through all of it, and I'm not just talking about the court case, I'm talking about for their whole lives. If you show a child support and that you believe them, the more that they are going to be okay with speaking about their abuse. Because if you get a child who discloses abuse and, people are calling them liars and telling them things like, I don't believe you, he's such a good person, or things like he could have any girl he ever wanted, why would he do that to you? Like, they're going to be less able to come forward because they're going to be too scared. And they're going to freeze in that moment. And then they're going to be stuck in that moment for the rest of their lives. Not coming forward and speaking with abuse for years, 5, 10, 15, 20, and then finally coming out and speaking about it. There's a lot of people that will, sit there and, as I said earlier, question, why did you wait so long to disclose? Or, why did you wait so long to tell somebody that it was happening? You just do, and there is literally no way to explain that. But just because the abuse happened 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And people in society need to quit, discrediting people who wait too long to come forward. Because everybody heals differently. Everybody heals differently. And I can't express that enough. We probably still have millions of women and men out there who haven't even come forward with abuse that they endured as a child. They say 63,000 children a year are sexually abused. But those are the reported cases. Imagine if every case of sexual childhood abuse was reported. That number would probably be triple. And that is sad. Those are sad facts that millions of kids a year are being sexually abused. Every 1 in 4 girls and every 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused. So if you're in a room full of, 4 to 6 girls, I bet you at least 4 of them have been sexually abused at some point in their lives. And the same goes for guys. If you're in a room full of, 7 to 8 guys, at least 6 of them men probably have been abused at some point in their lives. Now, whether they ever have came forward with the abuse or not, that is up to them. That is not for you, me, the president, the justice system, a neighbor. That is not for anybody else's right to say, well, that happened 20 years ago. You're shit out of luck. No. Statute of limitations should not be in place anywhere in America today. And there really needs to be an end to that. Because for, somebody to say you have 10 years after you turn 18 to disclose abuse, or it don't count. It didn't happen. Blah, blah, blah. It don't matter. Abuse is abuse. No matter how long you wait to come forward, it is still abuse and it still happened. And victims are still living with what happened to them every day of their lives. It is not something that goes away ever. Never, ever will somebody who's been sexually abused wake up one day and say, well, it doesn't matter that it happened to me. But it does. It matters. It matters. You matter. And it's really sad that, we can sit here and punish people for murdering, an adult murdering another adult. And they can be charged, life in prison, death penalty, all this stuff. But, the punishment on sexual predators is not that strong in America, and it needs to be stronger. What are you doing, buddy? Go. Sorry about that. But I'm going to end this video. And I hope that when you watch this, you know, you guys can take something from it and help you on your own healing. Thank you.